Last week I came across a book challenge on Instagram inspired by the famous The 12 Days of Christmas song. Posted by the Orchard Street Book Club, which I will link down below, I wanted to do my own version on it. And basically, for every line of the song, you suggest a book that goes with that theme. It'll make more sense when we get into it, so keep watching. And if you're new to the channel, hi, welcome, I'm Katerina. It is lovely to see you here. I make videos every single Tuesday yapping about books, and if that's something you're into, why don't you consider subscribing? So, the very first line of the song is 12 drummers drumming, and this calls for a suspenseful book. Because, you know, suspenseful moments have drums rapidly drumming in the background. So the book I'm going to go for is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This is a psychological thriller that follows a woman who, at the start, fantasizes about a couple that she sees through her train window during her commute to work every day. And during one of these commutes, she witnesses something shocking happen in their back garden, and then proceeds to become entangled in a missing persons investigation that dramatically changes her life. Like with most suspenseful books, the less said about it, the better. But I read this book like 8 years ago, and I still remember being so shocked by how it eventually played out. The story is thick with suspense because it very heavily relies on unreliable narrators, and it has perspectives of multiple characters. So you're constantly trying to piece together different people's accounts to try and crack the case. And as well, the main character also has an alcohol addiction, so there's a lot of memory gaps within the novel, which just adds to the mystery and suspense because it blurs the line between fact and perception. The book is also very psychologically complex too. It relies on real aspects of human nature to create tension and anxiety. And overall for me, this book just felt very believable and real as a thriller, and it just had me absolutely hooked. For the next line in the song, we have 11 pipers piping, and this calls for a book about music. I'll be honest, I haven't read many books about music, but one that comes to mind is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This story is set in the 1970s rock and roll scene, and the novel follows a fictional band called The Six along with Daisy Jones, who is an up-and-coming singer. She's very bold and free-spirited, whilst The Six is headed by a very brooding and stubborn leader who often clashes with Daisy. However, the music that they make together rises them all to fame, and this book is thick with themes of addiction, love, and the struggle for identity. Apparently, the story is based on the band Fleetwood Mac, but I don't really know much about that band, so I can't really verify that. But the layout of this book is very unique because it's written as like a documentary style format. The story is told via interviews of the band members and those that are close to them, which I must admit did keep the book punchy and engaging because it does span over many years. And in terms of music, I did like the raw exploration into the rock and roll lifestyle with all the sex and drugs that come in it, but it looks at it without glorifying it. And to be honest, I thought it was quite a realistic expectation of how destructive and pressurizing the industry can be. However, though, I'll be honest, I did think that the book overall was pretty average. I didn't think it was that exciting, just because I personally felt that the plot was quite predictable and it kind of just reinforced a lot of rock star stereotypes without really adding anything new. But I know others who absolutely loved this book, and it's really the only one I've read about music, so I'm using it for this category. The next line in the song is 10 Lords a Leaping, and this calls for a book about aristocracy. And one that I read earlier this year that is very fitting is Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. This novel is set between the 1920s and 40s, and it follows the life of a young man who is studying at Oxford University, and he becomes very obsessed with his friends there. His friends then invites him to his family home, which is basically a mansion, and there he meets this incredibly wealthy, aristocratic Catholic family, which he then goes on to have various relationships and romances with. If this plot sounds quite familiar, you're not going crazy. This book actually inspired the film Saltburn, but it doesn't have any of the questionable and disturbing scenes. If you know, you know. However, this book does have a lot of incredible social commentary on historic class and wealth in England, and how English aristocracy has basically constructed their worlds to keep commoners out. I'm not even kidding when I say that the rich people literally gatekeep the lower class out of wealth. This novel is also very exemplary of how the elite class can get away with so much unjust behaviour and even illegal actions purely because of their standing and position within high society. One thing that this book also touches upon that isn't shown in Saltburn is how the family further justify their actions under their commitment in the Catholic faith, as religion and the church are very heavy themes in the novel, which gives it another additional layer of complexity that overall was really eye-opening to read. The next line of the song is 9 ladies dancing, and this calls for a book about female friendship. This is a book I do talk about often, but it's just because it's so good, and that's My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This novel is set in a poor yet vibrant neighborhood in Naples in Italy, and we follow the friendship of 2 young girls from childhood into adolescence. And as they grow, their friendship evolves in a form of love, but also competition, with each girl pushing each other in different ways in order to excel. Amidst the backdrop of a very rapidly changing Italy post the World War, which very much shapes their experiences and choices. A wide array of themes are delved into, including education, class struggle, and feminine identity. I have never read a story that explores female friendship the way that this book does. It showcases the compassion and love that female bonds have, but also the resentment and jealousy that can sometimes come with it. The novel is also set in a patriarchal society that appears to be designed in a way to stifle female potential, which I think adds a whole new layer to the novel by showing the struggles faced by these girls. It's not only a story that explores the beauty and strength within female friendship, but also the sorrow that comes with watching a friend not succeed into a life that she could have because she didn't have the resources. I just love this book so much. It's full of melancholy and beauty and wonder, and I will literally never stop recommending it because it is just fantastic. The next line in the song is 8 maids are milking, and this calls for a book that is set on a farm. And a book that I read earlier this year that is very fitting is Lapnova by Atessa Moshfegh. This novel follows a very weird medieval town that just seems to be plagued by tragedy and misfortune. And the people that inhabit this town are extremely religious. They look to God for everything. And the book follows several different characters, including a poor orphan shepherd, a supernatural witch/wet nurse, and a corrupt lord. And after several misfortunes, the town eventually realizes that greed and manipulation are responsible for their suffering. If you're not familiar with this author's work, her stories are usually very captivating, but also quite disgusting. And this book falls nothing short of that. It is very on brand. And the author actually wrote this book during the pandemic. And once you know this, you can kind of see it because the novel has really strong parallels. For example, during times of suffering and restrictions, the wealthy enjoyed these obscene luxuries, whilst those who cultivated those privileges, in this case the farmers who cultivated the scarce food amongst the drought, were left to starve and had to face the brunt of these vulnerabilities when the wealthy could have protected them. I did really like this book. It isn't my favourite Atessa Moshfegh book, but it is a very solid one and is probably my favourite book that is set on a farm. The next line in the song is 7 swans are swimming, and this calls for a book about transformation. I know a few books about transformation, but probably my favourite one is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. The novel follows a woman whose wife gets stuck on a submarine for months on end during a deep sea mission. However, when she returns, she's a different person. It's almost as if she's like a shell of her former being. And we're alongside this main character as she tries to reconnect with her. But she ultimately finds that her wife is changed in more ways than one when she returns. This is a stunning book in terms of transformation because it explores it both literally and metaphorically. After the mission, the main character can see how her wife has physically and psychologically changed before her eyes, which ultimately shows how experiences that we go through on our own can ultimately affect the connections and relationships we have with others. And I feel like using the sea is a very interesting metaphor because it kind of shows how like the unknown self can be as mysterious and alien to others as the sea is to us. Like there's so much we don't know about it, and the majority of that is very deep beneath the surface. And it ultimately shows how transformation can both alienate and deepen our understanding of others. I honestly just think that this is an incredible book that will stay with you longer than you expect it to, and it's just so haunting and eerie, and I would just definitely recommend it for you to read. This author writes a lot of books about transformation, and I recently read her other book, Salt Slow, which is a short story collection all about female identity and transformation. So if you want to pick up that book too, feel free, because it is really good for a short story collection. The next line in the song is 6 geese are laying, and this calls for a book about motherhood. Again, I know many books about motherhood, but one book that I don't think I've actually mentioned before is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. The book is essentially a compilation of letters written by a son in his late 20s, all to his single mother who, in fact, cannot read. And all these letters essentially explore the family's history relating to his mum, his grandmother, etc., all of whose history is based in Vietnam. And throughout the book, he ultimately ultimately admits secrets to her that unearth who he is and what he's experienced. This book is very heavily focused on a mother and son relationship, which I think is a dynamic in literature very underexplored because we usually see mother-daughter tropes, at least I do. And this novel is very heavy on identity, particularly how he's very much caught up in the world where his mum is from and how he's struggling to cross that gap to the world where he wants to be, but at the same time exploring this very undeniable and instinctive love for her, whilst additionally discussing class, race, and the nature of masculinity. This is just a gorgeous read that is also very sad, so I'm just pre-warning you that it will probably emotionally destroy you. The next line in the song is 5 golden rings, and this calls for a book about wealth and greed. For this one, I'm going to be going for The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. Arguably, I could have gone for A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, but I felt like that would have been too on the nose with the theme, so I'm going to go with the other one. This book is a psychological thriller that follows a young man earning a living by committing a series of scams. And one day during one of these scams, he is approached by a CEO of a company who believes that the main character went to school with his son. He then asks him to bring his son home in order for him to carry on the family business. However, our main character becomes obsessed with this moneyed and luxury world that this family lives in, and it takes him down a very dark path to obtain the same luxuries and riches that they have. From a psychological point of view, I really liked how the main character isn't just your standard one-dimensional villain. He's very relatable in possessing some very human qualities about him. From growing up with a lack of money, he's very paranoid and insecure when it comes to his own wealth and image, and he therefore uses quality that he does have, in, for example, being highly socially intelligent, along with being able to read people's preferences and expectations very well, and he uses it to his advantage in various situations. Similar to Brideshead Revisited, I feel like this novel also has a lot of commentary on wealth and class. However, this is more from an American point of view rather than a British, which I also found really interesting. So yeah, I just thought that this book was very fitting in terms of wealth and greed because these are the qualities that the main character constantly chases after. The next line in the song is 4 calling birds, and this calls for a book about nature. And a book I don't think I've ever spoken about before on this channel is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is a coming-of-age story that's also a little bit of a murder mystery, set against the backdrop of the North Carolina marshlands in the 1950s/60s. And the book focuses on a girl who was brought up in these marshland areas after her family abandoned her, and she therefore develops a very deep connection with the natural world around her. However, one day she's implicated in a murder and leads to a trial that captivates the town. There are a lot of descriptions of nature within this novel, which is great because I feel like it really reaches its aim in showcasing to the author how brutal yet beautiful nature can be. And this environment has essentially allowed our main character to survive, both physically and emotionally, showing how humans can depend on it. And we ultimately see how nature saves her life in teaching her survival skills through resilience. I also feel like it gives readers a lot of awareness on conservation and environmental issues. It definitely left me with a deeper understanding and appreciation of my environment. And the marshlands isn't something that I've ever seen or really know about, so this was actually really interesting and new for me, and I can admit they seem quite scary. In the UK, it's not really common to come across marshlands, at least not where I've been from, so this was really interesting and new to me. It's a unique book, it's not a plot that I have ever read before, and I would recommend for you to read it too. The next line in the song is 3 French hens, and this calls for a book that's set in France. This choice is quite dark, but it's just such a good book, and that's Perfume, A Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind. This story is set against the backdrop of 18th century France, and we follow a guy who is born without any natural body scent, but has a very, very extraordinary sense of smell. And he's born as an outcast in society, and he feels invisible to those around him, but his extraordinary gift allows him to perceive the world in a way that others can't. He therefore pursues a career in creating perfume, but it leads him down a dark road to ultimately create the ultimate perfume. And it's not really a spoiler because it's literally in the title of the book, but he ends up murdering people in order to capture their scent. Firstly, this book is just incredible because the concept is just so unique, and also the abundance of rich sensory descriptions just shows that the talent of the author, because he literally finds a million different ways to describe the scent of smell, and they're so well described. Like, it literally transports you as a reader into the story so vividly, and it makes it so immersive and memorable. Genuinely, if this author just decided to sell perfumes, poems, I would buy every single one of them purely on the way he describes them because it's so captivating. This novel also has a lot of psychological depth and complexity because a lot of it revolves around aspects of human nature. We find the main character to be disturbing, alienated, and obsessive, literally stopping at nothing to reach his goals. And it's one of those stories that's just like so horrifying to watch, but at the same time you literally cannot look away because you need to find out what happens next. It really leans into like the sinister and scary aspects of human nature, which I personally love, and I think that you should very much read because it is fantastic. The second last line of the song is two turtle doves, and this calls for a romance. And this has to be my favourite romance book ever, and it's Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. And I actually think this is one of my favourite books of all time, so I just had to include it here. This is a coming-of-age story following an intense and passionate relationship that develops between two young men during an Italian summer in the 1980s. It's narrated by a 17-year-old boy who meets an older American grad student, staying at his family villa whilst he's researching alongside the boy's father. And the story essentially recounts a summer whereby this tentative friendship blooms into a romantic connection. Themes include sexuality, desire, identity, and the highs and lows of having a first love. I really think this story is incredible in the portrayal of romance between these two men, and I personally resonated with it in the way that it explored the intensity of emotions that come with a first love. The first time you experience this all-consuming desire for someone that literally makes you feel like you're going insane was particularly relatable for me. Also, it's a coming-of-age story, so it very much delves into identity and self-discovery, and it showcases the beauty of young love that comes with longing and yearning. These men go through such a journey of vulnerability and intensity to find each other, which just makes it so compelling and immersive to read. Honestly, after reading this book, my expectations of what I wanted in my love life exceeded exponentially. If a man doesn't yearn for me the way that these two do for each other, I don't want him. And even though that the ending is heartbreaking, it is still just an incredible romance book, and I will recommend it until the cows come home. And the very final line in the song is a partridge in a pear tree, and this calls for a book with a fruit on the cover. And whilst I was so tempted to go for Twilight, I am instead going to be going for Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This book follows a young woman working at a Silicon Valley startup company, and she essentially finds herself trapped in a toxic corporate nightmare. She's having to deal with long hours, horrible bosses, and even illegal projects. When she initially joined, she was relieved and optimistic, thinking that she finally made it, but the novel explores the dark side of living in a city with obscene wealth that exists alongside poverty. Whilst this book is quite depressing, I did find it very relatable when reading it, so I actually really loved it. It addresses the existential anxieties that I have around late-stage capitalism and current work culture, because it really shows the hellscape of living as a 20-year-old something in a big city working quite an intense job, especially in these toxic companies in these cities like Silicon Valley and Wall Street, where they value profit over their employees. And no matter how solid your morals can be in the beginning, a lot of people get stuck in doing jobs that they thought otherwise that they wouldn't, but commit to it because of other people's expectations, and also the pay check is quite nice. I know some people that thought this book was too depressing, but I genuinely really liked it, and I would recommend it for others to read. And perhaps ending on quite a sad note, those are the books I recommend for the 12 days of Christmas. What books would you have picked instead for these lines in the song? Any books that stuck out particularly for you? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I wanted to do something a little bit different, but still keep with the Christmas theme, as I believe Christmas is like a week away. Like, what the hell? If you did like this video, please drop a like down below. It really helps my channel out. And also, if you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I make new videos every Tuesday. Feel free to follow me on Goodreads, where I update what books I'm reading in real time, and also feel free to follow me on my Instagram. I post more personal stuff on there, but I also books as soon as I finish reading them, so you know what they're about, and also what I've rated them out of 10. And also, my voice is very much going because I'm slightly ill, and I've been out every single day this week because of Christmas social activities. Woohoo! But on that note, hopefully my voice will be better next time, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!